Rivers, maybe someone should tell the students at Columbia that Hamas is standing in the way of a ceasefire. But I think they're having too much fun taking over the university. What do you think? Hey, beautiful day out there. Get some sun, more sun than clouds for the first half of the day. Yeah, 60s into the 60s, J Dog. Nice and mild today to start our week. Got a packed show for you. We're going to pull you away from the gate here, get you up in the air for your news talk. Latest CNN poll. Ouch. If you're Joe Biden, 70% of Americans say the economy is in poor condition. 66% disapprove of Joe Biden. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This is CNN poll, not Fox. Just pointing this out. All right, we got a packed show for you. Going to start off with Paul Steinhauser. He reports nationally for Fox News and locally GMI Studios. Good morning, New Hampshire. The Pulse of an H. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Also, big meeting with Governor DeSantis in Florida and Donald Trump. Good morning, Paul. Was that like that eclipse that I missed, Paul? No, I'm sorry. Sorry, I had to say that. Hey, Paul, real quick, I guess, what's your quick reaction? You were a political director at CNN. You're at Fox now. You've done the national thing. This is a poll that CNN is playing up big, which makes me a little bit scratch my head, but it's not very positive for Joe Biden. Trump beating Joe Biden overall in this poll, I think 49-43. And look at these numbers. What do you make of this? Build back better. All right. Thank you, Paul. I just find all this stuff amazing. All right. Hey, we haven't had him on in a while. Rumor has it he's been down in Florida stimulating the economy. Who knows? Maybe part of that meeting with Governor DeSantis. Corey Lewandowski, Coast confidant of former President Donald Trump, presumptive Republican nominee. Also, of course, political advisor and strategist, and Windham, New Hampshire resident. Corey, welcome back to the show. Is it hard for you to adjust? You come back. Do you know what state it is when you wake up? All right. What do you make of this CNN poll showing Trump beating Joe Biden? And it's coming from CNN. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this DeSantis Trump meeting. What's going on here? That's right. Corey Lewandowski live. Good morning, Hampshire. The Pulse. Money. Okay, if you had to tell us, Corey, three names to keep a close eye on at this point versus a month ago is likely VP choices for Donald Trump going into the summer here. What can you give us three? Hmm. Hmm. Right. What Tim Scott? More? Any more thoughts there? Yeah. Right. Washington. Would you agree with me that Vice President Harris? It's interesting. Me being more of a student than a partisan type, looking at VPs in history. I mean, I can go back to Gore with Clinton. I can go back to Cheney and G.W. Bush. We can go back to even Biden with President Obama, and of course Pence with Trump. It seems to me that Vice President Harris has been the most background, kind of not as relevant in the administration. I'm trying to be very objective here. Do you agree with me? Mhm. All right, before I let you go, I don't know where this will go, but it's just a question about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because what I've noticed is the ignoring him completely by the national media. Doesn't exist, no story here. However, some of the political analysts I have on say that if he could get 10% of the vote in some of the states he's on the ballot in, like New Hampshire. These states, if it's a relatively close election, Kennedy could not win, but play a spoiler role. Who does RFK Jr. help or hurt more between Biden and Trump? Mm. Well, yeah. All right, Corey Lewandowski, thanks for being on. Good morning, Hampshire, the Pulse of an Age. Make it a good Monday. All right, coming up, we're going to hear from, we're going to tell you more of some of the news talk a little bit later on. Doug Tengden will talk about the economy. Does it feel like it's slowing? 70%. Listen to this number. CNN, not Fox. I always love it when I post something about the show to promote it. A couple of folks on the page, and I think it's great because I love all points of view. I really do. Always point, oh, that's Fox. CNN poll, CNN poll. 70% of Americans feel the economy is in poor condition, and more than two-thirds feel that Biden's presidency is basically a failure. CNN. Scratching my head on that one only because it's CNN. Interesting. Also, Florida, there was a story recently. We're going to come back and touch upon this. Ron DeSantis, speaking of his meeting with Trump recently, talked about the changes that President Biden is putting in place with Title IX for women's sports. And it looks like Florida is not going to comply with the new. This is a story from The Hill. The Hill, you can check it out. Florida rejects President Biden's attempt to rewrite Title IX for women in sports, and basically saying Florida will not comply with the recently unveiled changes to Title IX by the Biden administration. We're not going to let Joe Biden try to inject men into women's sports and activities, DeSantis continued. We're not going to let Joe Biden undermine the rights of parents, and we're not going to let Joe Biden abuse his constitutional authority to try and impose these policies on us here in Florida. So, men being allowed to compete in women's sports. What is New Hampshire's feeling on this? Have we heard anything here on how New Hampshire is going to respond to this federal change? A lot of people aren't even talking about it. The changes were put in place last week, and it basically would add protections, it says, for transgender students. But the bottom line is it would allow men to compete in women's sports. Back on the Pulse of an H on a beautiful Monday. Jack Heath, J Dog, the illustrious one, J Dog on the boards. Back in a moment. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I don't believe in coincidences, but this is interesting on this Monday morning, looking at who the next president may be. By the way, how you liking those gas prices these days when you go to fill up? It's interesting. This is CNN, not Fox. I mean, I keep saying this. Recent poll shows that um, the majority of Americans now feel that Trump's presidency was a success. The same poll, they now 61%, more than that number for Trump, now say the other way, say Biden's presidency thus far has been a failure. 70% of Americans in the CNN poll now say that the economy is in poor condition. Now, this is quite interesting and quite telling. Disapproval rating for Joe Biden continues to climb. So 60% or more disapprove of Biden's overall performance. 70% the economy's poor. Now, again, the whole thing on the economy, because I think Bill Clinton had a very good point back when he was running for president. It's the economy, stupid. That was his internal above the door mantra. And the economy, people didn't know back then. They didn't want to talk about it. The Bush, and I'll tell you, I was front and center in this. Okay, so truth be told, George Bush Sr.'s White House didn't want to even mention the word recession because he was running for reelection. And I was when I was at WMUR as the news director, and I guess I led the political reporting or hosted Close Up the program. I got an opportunity to go down and interview President Bush Sr. at the White House, and I was the one that asked him if he was aware that in New Hampshire our economy was pretty darn bad. And at that point in the early 90s, you couldn't really sell a house here. I don't know if you knew this. Look at the real estate market now. Back then, if you put your home on the market, say in Bedford, New Hampshire, hypothetically, and you put it on realistically priced, you wouldn't get a person to look at it in over a year. People were going to the banks and leaving their garage door openers and keys in the counter saying, I'm taking a job in another state. I had a doctor friend or someone we knew in Bedford when we lived there back then. He actually, when I was running the news or WMUR, he actually talked to me and said, "Hey, what happens if I just turn in my garage door opener and keys in the counter? I'm taking a new medical job at a hospital in Wisconsin. Can't sell my house here. Just going to leave it for the bank." That's what people were doing. And I was the one in that interview who asked President Bush Sr., "Are you aware that people are hurting in New Hampshire?" And he gave the famous answer now because it wound up on World News Tonight that night with Peter Jennings. And it was basically signs of a recession coming. President Bush, for the first time, acknowledged economic problems as he goes into reelection. And it was his comment, "Yeah, yeah, Jack, I know people are hurting up there in New Hampshire. I know they're hurting." And the only thing he could say was he had a note on his knee in his lap. He said, "Yeah, but we're promising some federal heating aid to go up there." But no, the economy was in the tank. And how ironic, by the way, not to give you a little bit of a presidential election history, that you had Ross Perot running at a time when the economy is slowing, and it helped give Bill Clinton a big upset win or a win over George Bush. Clinton became a two-term president. How ironic now, if you look at the CNN poll, 70% of Americans say the economy is poor, and you got a guy named Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running. And does it look similar here, anyone? Anyone, does this feel similar to the Clinton Bush Sr. shape-up matchup, except it's Biden and Trump? Do you remember even Governor Sununu saying here in this state, many people saying during the primary here, presidential, Trump can win the primary. He sure did, but he can't win a general election. Well, now CNN, of all networks, has done a major big sampling, the most recent one, saying Trump is leading in the key states and overall Joe Biden for election. Right now, he's winning in the race. 70% of the Americans say the economy is poor. More than 60% disapprove of Joe Biden, and 66% disapprove of Biden and the economy. This is a problem. Okay. My only question is, why is it CNN playing up the poll? Because typically they've been very, they put Trump on the news during the hush money trial for the ratings, but they're obviously not trying to help Trump's chances, nor should they. They're a news network, not a talk show. They're a news network. a big difference there. But you know how CNN leans. So I don't believe in coincidences. I don't know if they're just trying to expose this to kind of make things pick up. So if Biden does a little better in a couple months, but what I'm feeling, I don't know about you, what I'm feeling is we're going to hear from Doug Tengen in a little bit. What I'm feeling, and I'm sure you are, 603-228-2080 if you want to weigh in. I'm sure you're feeling that when you go to the grocery store, when you pay the energy bill, when you fill up your vehicle, when you buy anything, when you go out to dinner at a restaurant, nothing's getting cheaper. That's why the Federal Reserve cannot lower the interest rate right now. They were going to, if you remember, by June. That was the leading feeling. We're going to have a soft landing with the economy. Rates will start to come down a quarter of a percentage point each quarter by the Fed. Now the Fed's saying we can't really lower the rates. Inflation's still here. But wait a minute. So this is the problem Joe Biden has. About a few weeks ago, after the State of the Union, or a few weeks ago, he started going to states like Pennsylvania. He started to go to states like Pennsylvania, and he would meet with the Steelworkers Union and talk about Build Back Better, Inflation Reduction Act, Bidenomics. 70% of Americans in the CNN poll say the economy is in poor condition. So how is this campaign strategy working for Joe Biden? Can't the Federal Reserve is not lowering interest rates because inflation is not getting better, so he can't say the Inflation Reduction Act is working. Build Back Better. People are starting to get nervous about the economy. 70% don't think the economy is in good shape. So what are you promoting? What are you saying? You're saying that you've done a good job with the economy. Why does 70% of Americans in the CNN poll, not me, I'm telling you, 70% don't agree with you? It's because you haven't. You caused this inflation by spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars too fast into the economy with too few goods. So you start the fire of inflation. You pass all these legislations like $1.7 trillion, build back, infrastructure bill, Inflation Reduction Act. What's it doing? The money's gone. What's it doing? People are struggling. Cities are basically look like other countries with the homelessness problem. So you can't tout that. Don't go to San Francisco to hold a campaign event, by the way. Most of the major retailers have left because of the decay in the local economy and the homelessness. People can't afford things. The real estate market's going to start to slow, even in hot markets, because real estate rates aren't coming down for people that want to borrow money. Eventually, people with money starts to tighten up. So what do you pivot to if you're Joe Biden going into the summer? Do you want to start talking about the southern border that you've allowed to become so open that we have an immigration crisis? We going to pivot to abortion rights and just try and ride that one in like a surfer in Hawaii all the way in? Just talk about abortion rights. Don't talk about the economy. Don't talk about immigration. Do you want to talk about the Middle East? Because right now, a lot of students in Columbia aren't too happy with the United States and your position, even though I think you've been right to support Israel. What do you do if you're Joe Biden? You're kind of trapped. So I'm looking at this thing going, wow, this is interesting. All right, when we come back, we'll tell you about the proposed changes to that Title IX and what's going to happen here in New Hampshire a little bit later on. Anna Brown, citizens count on some legislative action this week. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an Age. Back in a moment. Interesting. Welcome back. Nice looking day out there. Mild into the 60s today, so enjoy that. Interesting. Corey Lewandowski, close with Republican presumptive nominee, former President Donald Trump, saying that Dr. Ben Carson now moving up on the list of possible choices, as well as Doug Burgum, who was ironically on the show at the end of the week, governor of North Dakota. Interesting. The short list is changing, and who knows when we'll hear that. But also Lewandowski reacting to the Trump the CNN poll, which now, if you were paying, listening there, the CNN poll basically showing Trump ahead of Joe Biden at this point, with 70% of Americans feeling the economy is in poor condition. So we have a lot going on in this morning, and as we get going, we'll keep you posted. It's interesting. I want to come back to a story I was just mentioning shortly there, but we have Anna Brown coming on, and we've talked about how some of the national issues are getting onto the local stage in states like New Hampshire. So, just taking a break from the basically the students taking over Columbia University. We'll just kind of let that one sit there. Just let that sit. They're probably having a blast, feeling, hey, we got the administration, we got control, we got control of our college, our university. And one thing I want to mention for the regular listeners out there of the show, and I appreciate it very, very much over the years. Just think for a moment. I'm not asking for a gold or silver star or a bronze or a plaque or a medal for participating. How many times, and I think this is a little tad or more than ironic, how many times has yours truly, how many times, if you remember and you recall, has yours truly on this program talked in a critical way of Columbia University long before this anti-Semitism broke through the surface? How long has yours truly been talking about Columbia University as a great example of kind of incredible anti-American sentiment on campus? Years. That's how long I've been talking about it. Not months or weeks, since all this student stuff, 900 arrested on college campuses or universities for the anti-Semitic stuff. Agitators. How many times have I talked about Columbia University being outright anti-American? The professors there, they hate this country. I'm getting sick and tired of this, by the way. We're still the freest nation on earth. Where do you want to move to? Tehran? North Korea? Moscow? Beijing? Go ahead. Be my guest. Columbia, in their criminal justice, they actually are paying like six figures to a bank robber who murdered a police officer years ago, because they think that would bring a unique insight to how bad police are to their students. Remember the North Korean defector I told you about? Number of years ago, came to this country legally, risked her life with her family to go through South Korea, to go to New York, got into Columbia. She said it was so anti-American, it was worse than her teachers in grade school in North Korea, Columbia. So I've talked about this in the show, how anti-American, long before the anti-Semitism stuff flourished, anti-American, that's what's going on at Columbia. It's not really about Israel or Gaza or Palestinians. It's anti-American. And it has been for years, probably 20. So Florida governor meeting with Trump, we just heard about that, saying that Florida's not going to abide by the final changes to Title IX. They're not going to abide by them. DeSantis has been criticized by the LGBTQ advocates in the past for state laws that they say harm their community, like the so-called "Don't Say Gay" law. Do you know what that law was, by the way, in Florida? Was it kindergarten and first and second graders, or under that kindergarten? You're not supposed to teach sexual education to a kindergarten or a first grader or something like that. That's all it said. Parental Bill of Rights was called. They called it "Don't Say Gay." But DeSantis not high on their list. But what about this change to Title IX? So the National Press Secretary, well, the Hills reach out to the White House on this to see what's going on. But basically, these changes are coming to Title IX, which took how many years for women to get these rights in sports? How many? And the one thing the one thing I don't understand, and I mean this sincerely, I don't understand how women in some areas or quadrants are so silent on this debate about men transgender, but men, basically a male being able to participate in women's sports. When women work so hard for so many years and decades to get the status of like VARs, the women's sports at universities and college and competition. Still not there yet on salaries, like in places like the WNBA or pro golf, but they worked hard to kind of get that. And now it's okay, I guess, according to Joe Biden, for someone who's a male to compete in women's sports. So I'm just curious, as this gets out there, what's New Hampshire's position going to be? Is there going to be a position? Are they going to accept? I mean, DeSantis is way out in front of this. He's saying that Florida will not play by these rules. They're not going to. They're not going to. They're going to fight the changes to Title IX. Florida's Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz Jr., told school leaders that Florida will fight the changes to Title IX. So the Biden administration, the statute beyond recognition, attempt to gaslight. Anyway, it's the stories. Check out thehill.com. It's a pretty good story. The Hill. Interesting. Yeah, I was, all the sort of Columbia University and the students know it. We've kind of taken over the president. Did you hear the story this morning? The deal, they're trying to reach a deal between the student union or the students at Columbia who've sort of taken over the campus, virtual classes the rest of the semester. I'm sure they're going to cancel the commencement address. They've broken off negotiations with the administration. So the students are now running Columbia. The student inmates are now running the Ivy League institution of Columbia. But long before, Columbia University has been a beacon, not of light or not of higher education, in my humble opinion, lower education. And long before the Hamas attack on October 7th. And by the way, isn't it interesting? Secretary of State Blinken in the Middle East trying to nail down a peace for Gaza, a peace in that region, saying the only obstacle now, this is the Democrat Secretary of State, not Donald Trump. He's a little tied up in court. Not today. They don't have any witnesses in the Stormy Daniels case. Secretary of State Blinken of the Joe Biden administration says they're close. They've been working behind the scenes, shuttle diplomacy, probably 24/7. And I mean that. Saying the only thing holding it up now is Hamas, not Israel. So anyway, Columbia, long before October 7th, long before the anti-Semitism has been flourishing in Harvard and Ivy League campuses for the most part, Columbia has been a bastion of anti-West, anti-American. Just listen to that North Korean student and her story as a student a couple years ago of just how anti-West, anti-American. We are the problem. This country stinks, the United States, America. We're the problem. Long before the anti-Semitism came to light. Long before. Columbia's been a real doozy of a place. And, I was talking to one of a show hosts nationally over the weekend, just back and forth. And, I did hear one of the colleges, and I think it was in Florida, a fraternity, believe it or not, they still have some fraternities in this country, sororities, fraternities, sort of went out and peacefully protested with some of the what do they call them now? The agitators, the anti-Israeli, whether they say they're pro-Palestinian, peace, but they're anti-Israel, a fraternity went out and started singing the national anthem to sort of drown out their protest. That must have driven them crazy. Our national anthem, that must have made them go berserk. But it's just kind of it's kind of interesting, I think. And look at how isn't it funny to you, or is it just me? Maybe it's my strange commonsensical sense of humor, tad contrarian. Isn't it kind of funny how this country sanitizes and the national media kind of runs through the washer and dryer with the little that little towel there that takes the static cling out, throws in a little bit of bubble wrap as well. They kind of sanitize these terms. So the college protesters, the riot police, the riot gear police were having to put on. It went from that. No one liked the term mob. Now it's agitators. agitators, like that's a commonly used word. It's a little bit like the immigration crisis. It started off as illegal alien, which some people say is rude, a legal immigrant. Then it was kind of like for a year or two, it was a good old accepted. It was okay for to say illegal migrant, and then it became migrant, and now it's undocumented migrant. Isn't it all kind of the same thing? All right, some commentary. 603-228-2080. We come back. Tengden, World Market Advisors, Doug on deck, talking about the economy. I think things are tightening. I don't see an interest rate reduction coming. What do you see? Back on the pulse of an H in a moment. Interesting stuff on Lewandowski saying that pretty much because so many people that they're polling are so negative towards Washington, D.C. and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle that Trump has sort of turned away from even a Tim Scott of South Carolina, who he seemed pretty high on as a possible VP pick, just because he's a senator. People want someone from an outside. So Lewandowski kind of gave a new short list of three, including Dr. Ben Carson and Doug Burgum of Dakota and Kristi Noem of South Dakota. We'll see. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse Vintage. Are things tightening it up? Is the economy going south? 70% of Americans in the CNN poll, CNN, by the way, feel the economy is in poor shape. Not good news for an incumbent president who's been talking about Build Back Better, Inflation Reduction Act, Bidenomics. 70% of Americans, CNN poll, say it's in poor shape. And the Federal Reserve, to prove this point, is not going to lower the interest rate, it looks like, anytime soon because of inflation. Doug Tengman, worldmarketadvisors.com. Good morning, Doug. It was kind of nice. It was pretty nice overall. Thank you. And you? There you go. All right. What do you think? Things slowing down or not as we go into the summer and fall? Well, they've been doing that for a few years now, I think. Yeah. You know, it is. And I'm just telling you, I think things are a little softer than a soft landing, but I may be wrong. And the other thing, Doug, is I always look as the best barometer of at real estate because it's the most real thing to me. Now we have an affordable housing crisis in the area, but I'm talking about if you're a home seller and you want to put your home on the market. We happen to live in one of the hotter markets in the country per capita. It's not normal here. In other words, you can look at, over the weekend, Doug. I'm sorry, I don't want to tide you up, but I'll say this quick. The NFL draft was in Detroit, and it was good for the area because Detroit has been hit so hard the last decade or so with high crime rates. The auto industry changes that, some homes in Detroit, you can get a home in Detroit for 50 or 60 or $70,000 or under 100,000. What can you get in New Hampshire for under $100,000 other than a shack or a small little shed to put in your backyard? Yeah. So, yeah, so what my point is, I'm looking at real estate locally in hot markets, and there's no question something's going on in North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina. They're the new hot spots, but in general, the people that borrow a little bit of money to buy homes, it's slowing down. The people that are still getting homes for over $1 million locally are people from out of state with just a lot of liquidity and cash, and they're not borrowing anything. That's what I'm summing up the real estate. I'm seeing things last longer. Seeing little things locally that I didn't see 3 to 5 months ago. Price cut, like you go to Zillow, Realtor, and you look at a home, and I'm just being, you live in Hanover, Etna, New Hampshire, price cut $50,000, time on market 39 days. I'm seeing a lot more of those. Yeah. All right, Doug, anything else? We're in the final minute. Doug Tangman, worldmarketadvisors.com. All right, Doug, enjoy the sun, enjoy the milder temperatures. Hey, tomorrow morning, let me promote this. Andrea Tomlinson. She's the founder and executive director of New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. And Andrea's going to be joining us at, I believe, the 10 o'clock hour, J-Dog. This is pretty cool. She founded the Portsmouth-based New England Young Fishermen's Alliance to help train young people whose passion for the sea and ocean makes it their life's work. In other words, professional fishermen. Age of that demographic has been getting older. So you like your lobsters in the summer and your lobster rolls. Who's going to be catching the fish and lobster? All right. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse Vintage. Hour number 2 coming up.